Kansas City. Whew. This is the first time I have ever been in an airplane hangar, let alone on a stage inside of one. I grew up outside of DC, and I was a huge fan of the Air and Space Museum. But this is an actual freaking airplane hangar with actual freaking planes in them. This is very, very cool. I'm very happy to be here. My belly is still full from the Gates barbecue that I had last night. I feel like I'm doing it right. I hope so. But I've got 30 minutes to talk to you guys about everything I've picked up in the last 8 or so years of being a startup guy. It's literally the only thing I have done since graduating from college. I know nothing else. If the internet disappeared tomorrow, I would be worthless. You could use me as a beast of burden. That would be the extent of my skills. So I'm very grateful to have this wonderful internet economy and be talking to you all here. Because I know firsthand how awesome KC is, because I got to visit y'all about 6 months ago during the internet bus tour. I'm gonna talk about that a little bit later, but the general theme of the talk is this: what are you waiting for? All right, that's me on the Twitter, so if you don't get a chance at the microphone, you can talk to me afterward. This is what I would have called my talk otherwise. This is the general theme of everything I've been doing for the last year or so since leaving Hipmunk. It's been sending this message, this wonderful Courage Wolf message, that really defines innovation on the internet, right? The great freedom this provides us, the great access this provides us, is to take an idea we have that's in our heads and actually get it out into the world. And for so long, so many great ideas have never left people's heads. Or if they did, they didn't reach very far. It maybe got to their families or their communities, or if they got really, really lucky, spread further. But that's the power of this platform. That's why I care so much about it. And when I got started on it, you see me now, right, 8 years later, on a stage, talking to you about my startup experience. But this is what I looked like when Steve and I started Reddit. This is the very first photo taken of us at Combinator. I'm repping UVA hardcore. You can see my hat. It's where I went to school. I've got my janky Cafe Press Reddit shirt on. We had no idea what we were doing, all right? And you'll hear from people over the next couple of days who are gonna sound like they really know what they're doing. And I'll tell you what, we're all still figuring it out. We don't have anything for sure. But I can tell you, as soon as I graduated college, I was woefully unprepared. And I can speak for Steve. We were both woefully unprepared for what we were about to do. But that's okay. No one actually really knows what they're doing. No one actually is fully prepared for their undertakings. But it's about adapting. It's about realizing at university, and I love UVA, don't get me wrong, university can't prepare you for a lot of this stuff. The very nature of entrepreneurship, the very nature of doing a startup, means doing things that haven't been done before. It means taking theory and ideas and actually making stuff with it and seeing what your users tell you works and being okay with failing. Right now, I spent the first half of my college time obsessing over not failing because I was going to be a lawyer. Usually that's when there's like a gasp in the audience. But really, I wanted to be a lawyer. I was trying so hard. I was going to be an immigration lawyer. It was going to be awesome. I was studying for the LSATs, and I was obsessing over my GPA because I needed it to be high enough for the law schools to want me. And yet failure, yet getting those failing grades is clearly not a way to succeed in college if you want to get the paper degree at the end, but it's the very nature of entrepreneurship. And so for 20 years, I was being programmed to care so much. And this isn't to say for the college students in the audience are watching, like, don't bother going to class anymore. It's to say that we've been conditioned to care so much about not failing that when we're presented with opportunities to fail on a daily basis, which is basically what entrepreneurship should be, mind you, to learn from those little failures, it's challenging. It takes a bit of a shift in mentality. And we lucked into it. We really lucked into it. We didn't quite sit in an NBA commissioner's seat lucked into it, but it takes this little bit of timing. You can't create serendipity. You can sort of facilitate the environment in which facility might happen, but you need to take advantage of it. And so our story actually could have taken a very different turn. I could have not decided to go to Waffle House instead of an LSAT prep course, which is what I did during the summer of my second year. And when I went to that Waffle House, I had a little Waffle House epiphany and realized I didn't really want to be a lawyer. I really liked waffles. And I could try to find some other, seriously, if you've had Waffle House, you know what I'm talking about. I realized I didn't really want to devote my life to this. Instead, I wanted to take a chance. I wanted to talk to my best friend, Steve Huffman, and talk him out of his safe engineering job and into perhaps the uncertainty of starting a company. And we worked for a year building this thing we cared so much about. It was called, I'm a little embarrassed, but it was called My Mobile Menu, or was the acronym for it. Jeez, wow, okay, all right, so you don't like the name, fine, we'll workshop it. And we were going to solve this problem of waiting in line or being a few blocks away from Starbucks or whatever food place, and knowing you're going to get the same Frappuccino you get every morning, except you still have to show up there and wait in line. If you could just place that order with a couple of clicks and have it there waiting for you so you could just grab it and go, we thought this would save people a lot of time and they would love it. And I spent a year researching this back in Charlottesville. I talked to every restaurateur, every cafe, everyone, and they were sort of on board, although they were using fax machines at the time to take online orders. But I thought, no, it's going to be fine. And we worked. We thought about all the ways in a pre-smartphone world that we could somehow get people placing these orders via text. We were going to hack it. We were convinced we were going to hack it. We incorporated a company, Red Brick Solutions, LLC, and we were going to do it. But a very fateful thing happened in the spring, of our fourth year, our senior year. It was spring break. And in the weeks before spring break senior year, Steve had learned that one of his favorite internet pundits, a guy named Paul Graham, was giving a talk up in Boston called How to Start a Startup. This was 2005. This was before the Social Network film, all right? And we had heard that this talk was happening, and we also realized it was our senior year spring break, right? The last chance to go out and have a great time. And so, of course, we went up to Boston on our senior year spring break to hear a guy give a talk called How to Start a Startup. But it was really fortuitous, and it actually wasn't that big of a deal because beaches are notoriously hard places to bring laptops because there's no Wi-Fi, the screen glare is terrible. Like, we wouldn't have had a good time if we'd gone to the beach anyway. So we went up to Boston, and we heard Paul give this talk, and at the end of the talk, went up to him. And Steve he had one of Paul's books with him and got an autograph in it. And then I followed, and I said, Dr. Graham, which is what I called him back then, I guess, Dr. Graham, it would totally be worth the cost of buying you a drink if we could just pitch you on our business. We've started a company. We've come all the way up from Virginia to hear your talk. And, what would you be up for it? And he was like, really? You came all the way from Virginia for this? And all right, sure. And we met him for coffee later that night. And there we pitched him. We had this whole plan set up where Steve was going to win him over because Steve was the programming genius and he would give us credibility. And then I'd come in there and pitch the actual company. But Paul just said, let me hear the company. So we threw that plan out the window, and I pitched him, and Paul went off for 45 minutes about what a great idea this was and all of his different notions of how this could change retail. And we thought, damn, this might actually work. This is one of Steve's heroes who's telling us your idea doesn't suck. You actually have a shot. And a few weeks later, he announced Y Combinator, which was, at its time, a sort of one-of-a-kind seed stage venture fund, funding maybe $6,000 to $10,000 per founder in companies that were little more than a prototype. So we applied to YC, which was up in Boston, which is where this photo was taken. And we went up for our interviews, and we were so excited because Paul had already told us he didn't hate our idea, and we thought, this is going to be great. We're going to kill it. We're going to get funding. This is going to be so awesome. My Mobile Menu is going to take over the world. And they rejected us. So we got really drunk, and the next morning, hungover, on a train, a very long train ride back to Charlottesville, I get a call on my cell phone. And at this time, we had decided, you know what, we don't need them. Dust our shoulders off. We're going to prove them wrong. Is going to be the best thing ever. The more I say it, the more I realize, maybe not a great idea. This is going to be the best thing ever. We're going to prove them wrong. But as soon as that phone rang and I saw it was Paul, I picked up. I was like, hey, Paul, hey. How can I help you? And he says, listen, we don't like your idea. It's too early for mobile. You're going to have to make deals with carriers they don't want to make with you. But we like you guys. So if you're willing to change your idea, we'll let you into Y Combinator. We need to think about that for a second. Let me call you back. And Steve had already jumped over me to go tell the conductor who we needed to get off at the next stop. Where are we? And so we got off somewhere in Connecticut, got the next train back to Boston, obviously called Paul and said, yeah, we're coming back, and dropped an idea we had been working on for the last year because of this thing called Y Combinator. It wasn't even called Y Combinator back then, but because this guy, Paul Graham, said he would take a chance on us, not necessarily on our idea. And it changed my life. This is basically the place where we built Reddit, Somerville, Massachusetts. This was from our roof where we used to, it was so great. Those summers in Boston are hellacious. They don't tell you that before you go there, but it's sweltering. And so at night, once the sun set, we would go out on the roof with either the hookah or some beer and watch Band of Brothers on our laptop. And I have the fondest memories of this. I mean, we'd be like, some of those episodes, we'd be bawling at the end of it, but it was such a great, like, you know, co-founder, buddy film. Like, oh, it was awesome. Great series, by the way. So all of this stuff happened. And like I said, it happened basically because we didn't go to the beach for spring break. And Paul Graham was willing to listen to us for a few minutes. And these things happen. This serendipity can happen. And you all are totally in control of this. Even though at times it feels like you're not, these opportunities exist. Now, I want to point out that all the stories that I just told, and all the stories of startups that I've been involved with, all of which have cute mascots, which is just a thing I do. I really like them. None of the stories took place in Silicon Valley, right? We were talking about Virginia. We were talking about Boston and Somerville and Cambridge, Massachusetts. This is something that didn't really come to my attention until very recently. Now, I really want to talk about hipmunk stuff because we're in the middle of an airplane hangar, but that's not, unfortunately, on the menu for today. What is well, the SOPA Pippa fight. Now, if you might remember, a year and change ago, the internet went dark on January 18th because a bunch of websites were fed up with these two bills, bipartisan bills, which were potentially going to shut down the internet. And millions of Americans called their senators, called their reps, and actually won the day. They actually used social media to make enough noise that even our elected officials had to pay attention. And this was at a time when, I don't know if you can read this, this is a TV coverage chart from Media Matters during the months of SOPA and Pippa. So this is showing you the TV news coverage. On the far left is the British royal family. Not even our royal family. Like, there's a reason we had a revolution. It was so we wouldn't have to hear this bullshit anymore, right? Like, but yet it got more TV news coverage than everything else. You'll notice number 2 is Tim Tebow, who I still don't understand, but it's been fascinating living in New York and hearing Jets fans bemoan that whole last season. Casey Anthony after that, the Alec Baldwin plane incident. Really? Words of friends? The Kardashian divorce, which pains me as an Armenian. It pains me that this still got more coverage. And then finally, SOPA. So you can see these news networks are not that interested in covering it. Shouldn't surprise you that their parent companies were the co-sponsors of the bills. But the internet said these bills shall not pass. And that was awesome. A bunch of people, a bunch of citizens defeated $94 million in lobbying from the entertainment industry and basically told everyone, don't mess with the internet. We actually crowdfunded this billboard on the internet and put it outside of Lamar Smith's offices in Texas. Lamar Smith was the father of SOPA. We just wanted to let them know, just don't mess with the internet. But one of the memes that came out of this, and this was the impetus for the film, one of the themes that came out of this was Silicon Valley versus Hollywood. Silicon Valley versus Hollywood. And it was so frustrating to see, right? Everyone wanted to say, oh, it's Silicon Valley versus Hollywood. No, innovation, especially in the internet economy, is not limited to Silicon Valley. This was one of those myths that was incredibly frustrating, and it's like a lot of sort of Hollywood interpretations of history, not exactly true. The Battle of Thermopylae was not at all like 300, by the way. So we decided, over burgers, Eric is the general manager at Reddit, we decided, like, it's one thing for us to talk about this stuff. It's one thing for us to say, no. It's not Hollywood versus Silicon Valley. It was Hollywood versus America. Like, internet innovation is happening all over this country, and that's why millions of people rose up and said no to these bad bills. But it's one thing to talk about. It's another thing to actually just let everyone else talk for themselves. So we thought, let's get a bus. This is something that wasn't being talked about during the presidential campaign. So let's get our own campaign bus. Let's crowdfund it on the internet. Let's make it literally half red and half blue to show just how bipartisan internet freedom is. And let's drive it all over. And Eric took a look at the debate schedule and saw that the first presidential debate was in Denver. And the vice presidential debate was going to be in Danville, Kentucky. And so we looked at the map and said, perfect, we're going to drive right through the heartland, make as many stops as we can, and show off the Silicon Prairie. Show off all of this stuff and bring a half dozen reporters with us who wanted to come aboard a bus with an uncertain schedule for 9 or 10 days and drive all over the country? And these reporters said, sure. And then we brought a documentary crew called Nimblebot, which shot a documentary that we would use to show everyone who wanted to see just what was going on. And we brought a Declaration of Internet Freedom, something that was written up by a bunch of friends about 8 months ago that lays out like a basic litmus test for internet aptitude that we hope our politicians would sign on for. We went to Friday night football games with the folks at Huddle. I mean, like, this is great because I'm preaching to the converted here. Dawala shut down a bridge for us in Des Moines, and we hosted an internet uncaucus. Like, we had people like Carl get up on stage talking about how crowdfunding was changing his hog farming business. Like, we had the local motors company bring a rally fighter, which was our lead car. Can you imagine how badass this was? You've got the Internet 2012 bus with this monster leading the way. Like, that car is, by the way, totally designed and crowd designed using the internet. Threadless is cool because it helps people crowdsource shirts. Local Motors does it with cars, and they do all the manufacturing here in the United States. Their business, all these businesses, could not have been possible without the open internet, and we didn't need to say that, they did. We just asked them. Even random truckers we met in rest stops. Everyone wanted to know what that bus was about, and once we explained it, they were like, I will gladly join your caravan. And he couldn't because he had very important shipments to make. But it was so heartening because literally every person we met was on board with this. And so we put together this film, Silicon Prairie, which actually just dropped last week, and I encourage you all to download it. It's pay what you want, so just download it, torrent it, I don't care. The important thing is that it gets seen. And we actually hosted a private screening at the museum in DC a few weeks back and had a packed room. And most excitedly, had 4 sitting US representatives in the audience who watched, who spoke about it, who gushed about it. If you could do anything, in fact, you should watch it. And if you like it, tweet it at your representative, tweet it at your senators, and make sure they see it too, because we've got allies here. I don't know how many Kansans we have, but Senator Moran, any love? Yes, are there? Yes, all right, good. He has been a boss. And I remember showing up at his office in November and he's in the Senate, so when Protect IP was still kind of floating around. And he sat with a bunch of tech entrepreneurs and was like, I get it. Cool, I'm co-signing a hold on this bill because it's going to be bad for Kansas and it's going to be bad for America. And I wanted to high-five him, which was totally improper etiquette at the time, so I did not. But there are allies all over this country who get it, who are in office, but not nearly enough. So anyway, take a look at the film, please share it, get it to everyone. So we can look at this myth and know, hopefully, from now on, that is simply malarkey, all right? There's no truth to that. And one of the best ways that we can combat it is not just with this film, but for you all to keep being awesome, for you all to keep growing companies, for you all to keep raising money from the coast and bringing it right back here, right? One of my favorite stories to tell around New York, because I live in Brooklyn, one of my favorite stories to tell around New York is the fact that Dawala raised a bunch of money from some of the best investors in New York, Union Square Ventures, and said, thank you so much for the money, we are going back to Iowa. That is awesome. That is incredibly awesome. And we see, let's clap it up for Dawala, right? And as the cost to start these companies falls, and it falls every day. Literally, we had to order the servers off of Newegg in 2005 for Reddit, install them in our apartment, take them to the co-location facility. The only cool thing about that co-location facility was it had man traps, which we never saw, but we knew were safeguarding our servers. And imagine just a few years later when we started Hipmunk, we never saw a single server. We just took out a credit card, went to Amazon, and said thank you for the EC2 and S3. Right? The costs fall every day. The barriers are falling every day to build these companies. And as you require less capital, you have more leverage as founders. And that means investors, we have to work a lot harder to earn the right to invest in your companies. And anything that shifts the needle into the founder-friendly direction is something that I'm on board with. So, innovation, not legislation. This is a meme that was repeated throughout the entire SOPA PIPA fight. I kept bringing this up all the time because the entertainment industry decided that it would be a better idea to legislate their businesses to keep them relevant instead of just innovating, which we know is pretty much the opposite of how every other industry in this country works, right? When consumer preferences change, whether it's to VCRs or DVDs or the internet, businesses adapt they adapt or they go away, because that's how capitalism works. And so when I'm having these debates with these folks, it's really, really infuriating, because they bring up the same broken issues about how, no, artists are being destroyed by piracy. They are not being destroyed by piracy. Artists are adapting to it already. It's the labels that are having trouble because they've never wanted to adapt. But artists are figuring it out. And breadpig, that's right, breadpig, which is the social enterprise I started, is sort of helping be a kind of 21st century management company. What I mean by that is, one, our artists have total control of everything they produce. It's actually even published under a Creative Commons license, but that's all of their preference. But we make no editorial decisions. They just do their awesomeness. They've done all the hard work. We also give them a majority of the profits. They get over 75% of the profits, 75%, right? Because why not? They've done all the marketing, they've built the audience. All we're doing is talking to suppliers, basic logistical management that no one wants to do. And I think it can be an example of a new way to look at even creating artistic projects, right? We saw this bubble up shortly after Sopa This was a photo about a soul legend named Lester Chambers of the Chambers Brothers. This image went viral. It bubbled up on the R Music subreddit, and a bunch of people were justifiably pissed off, because this man, because he basically signed some terrible contracts, has for decades been a part of producing huge hits. Time Has Come Today, I mean, songs that we all have seared into our brains, but who has been left penniless. For the last few years, he's lived purely on the generosity of a nonprofit called Sweet Relief, which is a nonprofit created solely to take care of musicians who have been shafted by the music industry. Like, when you have nonprofits that are created to do solely that, that's probably a sign that something is broken. And so what was so heartbreaking about this was, again, for all the music he created, he literally was not paid. And if he was, it was, $5, $10, $50. So we went to his home. I emailed him out of the blue after seeing that photo, and I thought, maybe he'll listen to this internet guy. And fortunately, he did. And he said, yeah, come on over. And he lives up in Petaluma, California. And I said, all right, listen, Kickstarter is a pretty solid way for artists to get their creative projects funded. What if we just helped you out producing a video? So I sat with him, he told his stories. We shot a video for it and put together a Kickstarter campaign. The short version of it is, he hit his goal. In fact, his goal was about $39,000, he hit $61,000. And you started seeing all this momentum build, because here's a guy who didn't have a Twitter account, he didn't have a Facebook page, he hadn't curated a following like so many of today's artists are doing online to sort of control their own destiny, but it still worked out. Because he had a legacy, he's an extremely talented musician, and we were simply offering for him to get a chance to make an album that he himself would wholly own. In this case, he owned everything, because, the least we could do. So this has been a great success, and actually Lester's album is going to come out in April. So check it out on iTunes when it comes out. But we started working with other artists, and we started noticing this effect. And these are all Kickstarter examples, because it's obviously the leading crowdfunding platform. Well, what's so exciting is, so here's a dude, Zach Wiener, who draws Saturday morning breakfast cereal webcomic. He lives in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, all right? But over the last few years, he's built an extremely loyal following of people who love his comic. So when he wanted to do a choose your own adventure novel, sorry, that's actually copyrighted, an adventure of your own choosing novel, seriously, it's copyrighted. He simply went to his fans and said, listen, I need $15,000 for the first printing run. If you'll back me, this will come to fruition. As you can see, he raised $130,000. And so we started seeing this proof, like, okay, an artist in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, who can build a following online, can come up with a way to get creative projects funded. And we kept hearing the same thing. Oh, no, it's not going to work. Maybe it worked for this guy. Maybe it raised $100,000, but it can never raise more than that. And so we did another one, and it raised $340,000. This is actually the same author. This was a book of his comics about science and how it ruins everything since 1543. And so we start seeing, all right, and then there's of course pushback, and it's like, oh, well, it was only $340,000. So it's like, let's do another one. This is a storytelling party game, which raised $360,000, called Story War. And this is a dude in Queens who, it's basically like a apples to apples meets internet things plus random storytelling creatures. So imagine trying to describe who would win in a fight between a zombie and Medusa. Because you can imagine, she's already undead. Well, as long as the zombie but does the zombie have a brain, right? The zombies do not technically have a functioning brain. I don't want to go into this because clearly you guys should all be playing Storyware to figure it out. This was a dude who had a good idea. And he pitched it to the world, and from Astoria raised that much money. Now, we did it again. And this time, it became the Kickstarter publishing record. And this was by a guy named Ryan North, an extremely friendly, wonderful Canadian behind Dinosaur Comics. And he had a similarly interesting idea, which was to do a choose-your-own-adventure version of Hamlet. Now, that's not a typo, right? Raised over $500,000 for a choose-your-own-adventure, adventure of your own choosing version of Hamlet. And now, what I love about this story is now it's like, oh, right, there is no way on earth that anyone gets an advance of that size for a book that is an adventure of your own choosing about Hamlet. But this isn't so much to praise Kickstarter, although it is a fabulous platform for this. It's to praise the fact that these barriers fall every day, and it's not just for startup founders, it's for creatives too. And what's so exciting about this is, again, a lot of the traditional gatekeepers are starting to lose their grip, are starting to fade away. And the hope is that as more access grows, as more people get the skills to make the most out of that access, there's gonna be more great stuff. And you guys have right here the fastest internet in the country. And I am extremely jealous of that. You have no idea how extremely jealous I am, because when I see something like this, this Veronica Mars movie project has already raised $4 million with a little over 2 weeks still left to go. I know you're gonna be able to download it in full HD a lot faster than I will, and that makes me a little jealous. But you know, kudos, all right? Because this is proof. It snowballs because when people see this, when they see success, they realize, holy shit, I can do this too. And you see this in startup communities as well. We saw this in Boston back in 2005 when there wasn't much of a Web 2.0 tech scene. We were seeing it in startup communities all over the world. And one of the best things you all can realize as members of your respective startup communities is this is not a zero-sum game. All right? This is not something where, if someone succeeds, there's a little less success in the world for me. It is absolutely not the case. And it's that camaraderie and it's that spirit that helps create these startup communities and helps break down normally restrictive industries. Because that's not how so many other people are playing the game, right? So many other people have for so long been trying to erect these barriers, trying to erect these gatekeepers because it gave them this idea of power, it gave them some control, but in reality, they're losing that every day. And it's exciting. It's really, really exciting because if you look at so many incumbents, when you think about your own businesses or your own creative projects, whatever it is you want to do, I want to break entrepreneurship out of this idea that it is just for people who want to be the next Mark Zuckerberg. Being entrepreneurial is something that is being done every day by people all over, most of whom are not trying to be the next Zuckerberg. Right? They're people who are trying to get their documentary funded. They're people who are simply starting a new Tumblr blog involving bizarre Photoshop mashups of cats and Ryan Gosling, which I would really like to see. I think the world needs that. And that's the perspective we need to have, because that is how this all starts to change. That's how we start to get better stuff. And one of my favorite little anecdotes is a story that actually happened, excuse me, from a guy's home in Des Moines, Iowa. It actually happened within the comments of a Reddit thread. It was a question, I believe, on Ask Reddit, the subreddit, about who would win, a battalion of modern-day Marines or the entire Roman army. Think about that for a second, right? So if you transported them instantly back in time, you'd have to deal with the fact that their ammo is going to be limited, their fuel is going to be limited, so a lot of their modern weaponry is going to be limited. But I mean, the Romans just had swords and spears and shields, right? But so does the modern training win? Does the numbers of the Roman Empire win? It enthralled a lot of people. Hundreds of thousands of people tuned in to see this debate that happened online. And what happened was a dude in Des Moines, sitting at home, who was used to writing instruction manuals. He had had a bunch of different jobs doing writing, but I believe at the time he was writing instruction manuals, started this narrative about this squad that had gone back in time. And I don't think he could have imagined what was next. He started seeing this positive feedback. He started seeing people upvote and tweet and talk about it. And James looked around and said, holy shit, I can't stop. I need to keep writing this because so many people are interested. So they created the subreddit for Rome, Sweet Rome. And all of a sudden everyone flocked there, and people were making fan art, and they were coming up, they were creating their own trailers for it. And holy shit, like this thing is starting to grow. Within a few days, he starts getting some phone calls. Within another few days, he actually has a deal signed. And before you know it, Warner Brothers has picked up this screenplay that he has now written. So hopefully, we still don't know if Rome Sweet Rome comes to fruition. But what I do know is this guy James now has something, now has validation, not only for him, but for everyone else who's ever thought about creating a screenplay. Like within the comments of a random thread on r Ask Reddit, a great idea was able to bubble up and win. And like I said, these barriers have not all fallen, but they continue to. And this is what we need to strive for, because ultimately, this is where ingenuity, this is where innovation is going to come from. And like I said, it is not restricted to Silicon Valley. And we sit here in a modern marvel, right? The airplane hangar. Every time I get on a plane, I'm still blown away by the fact that I am sitting in a chair and it's going to go up to 30,000+ feet and take me to my destination within a few hours, and I won't have to think twice about it. That is incredible. Now, to build this kind of thing is no small feat, right? To build this kind of thing requires massive factories, tons of labor, tons of costs. That's why you don't see thousands of people saying, I'm going to start my own airplane manufacturer. Though, when you can start lowering those costs, when you start lowering the access and people can get into it and start innovating and start tinkering, you're going to get more innovation. You're going to get better stuff. And so when I think about the last great revolution, I think about the Industrial Revolution when it comes to humankind. If you wanted to change the world during the Industrial Revolution, you needed to open a factory, right? But here today, with the internet revolution, you need only open a laptop. And once you've gotten a hold of that idea, and once you realize the power of that laptop and that internet connection, just get out of the way. Get out of the way, because it is going to be incredible. And so that's what makes me so excited, right? Because what used to be restricted, what used to have gatekeepers to creativity and to innovation is falling every day as software eats the world, as Mark Andreessen says. And you all, wherever you are sitting with your laptop and your internet connection, have the potential to create greatness, to share your awesome ideas and actually have them spread. And that is the kind of world I want to live in. And that's why I strive so much for the open internet. So thank you so much.